called anticipatory grief, which is I'm grieving in advance of the loss, and that can happen. So then, if a lot of people, or even a few people are walking around with this unprocessed anxiety, then it starts to impact our whole system. And so that could be our family, our friend group, our congregation, any group in which you move, that your anxiety and their anxiety are together creating more anxiety. So that's why it's really important to deal with it. And in a healthy community, people figure out ways to validate that. And so here's a really practical example. If you've ever thought, oh, maybe I don't want to go to church today. I'm just in such a bad mood. I don't want to bring anybody down. So let's make it okay for people to say to each other, how are you? I'm kind of struggling today. Wow, thanks for sharing that, right? That's a great response. The person doesn't have to tell you all the reasons they're struggling. You can just accept their feeling. And, if you know them, you might want to say, is there anything that I can do? And then the response might be no, but thanks for asking, right? And I think when we practice responding differently than how are you, I'm fine, right? Because a lot of the time we're really not fine. We enlarge that space for more emotions to show up and for them all to be okay. Because when you think about it, all of our emotions are gifts from God, right? Our sadness tells us that something's missing, something that was really valuable. Our anger tells us that we're really frustrated and we want to change something, and we might or might not be able to change it, right? And our fear tells us that we need to be on guard, right? And again, 357 times, scripture says, don't be afraid, but it's a common human response and we need to deal with it, right? And so I'm going to talk about some more practices to help you with fear. So symptoms of individual anxiety, you might be wondering, am I feeling that? I've listed some: racing thoughts, fatigue, irritability, rapid mood changes, can't sleep well, appetite change, avoiding doing things that are pleasurable. You might think of those as depression symptoms, but I think they're also anxiety symptoms because we can't figure out what we need. I'm feeling maybe just sort of a vague sense of dread, like something is going to happen. I don't know what it is, but I just can't seem to relax. And then in groups, what do we notice in our families and our friend groups? Just feeling that isolation that I talked about before, maybe not good communication. So something called triangulation, where you're worried about person A, but instead of saying to person A, you say, gosh, I've been kind of concerned about you, you tell somebody else, right? And then if that person, like, if they don't know what triangulation is, they might say, well, here's what I've noticed about that person. Pretty soon, like, those two people are talking about that other person, and they're like, why is everybody looking at me like that, right? So the best thing would be if you say directly to somebody, are you okay? Because here's what I've noticed about you. And if somebody says to you, I'm worried about so-and-so, a good response might be, I wonder if you've talked to them about what you're noticing and your fears. Okay. So that's just one unhealthy communication pattern that can arise. Conflict levels go up. Why? Because we don't have as many resources to deal with conflict when we're overwhelmed with our own anxiety. I'm noticing some facial expressions that I'm having trouble reading. So I want to encourage you to interrupt me if you think something that I'm saying is different from your experience that you want to share or doesn't make sense. Okay. But I will leave some time at the end to talk. I didn't say that at the beginning. Yeah, and a lot of depression symptoms and anxiety symptoms are kind of circular. So you feel anxious, you feel worried, but it's exhausting to stay at that level where you're sort of vibrating. And so eventually you just start to lose your energy and get kind of depressed. But then if you stay depressed long enough and somebody says, whoa, you're really depressed, you need to do something, that can spark your anxiety. And you go, oh, I shouldn't be depressed, but I don't know what else to do, right? So that's how it becomes circular. So Proactive self-care. I think we all know these things, but we need to remind ourselves and each other. We need to get enough sleep, right? It's really easy not to. And stay hydrated and eat right. Get regular exercise and monitor how much you're drinking, especially if you grew up in an alcoholic family. Just notice, like, am I looking forward to that drink every night? That's probably time to take a little break and see if I can get along without it. When you're socially connected, you're gonna do better. When you have enough white space in your calendar, like if you look at your calendar and every single day has something on it, that's probably too much. Even if you get your energy from other people, you still need to balance that. Creative play that does not involve screens. So tell me, what are your favorite ways to just play?
Watch bird.
Bird watching, great. What else? Sewing, yeah. Okay. Reading, yeah.
Listening to classic rock.
Yeah. Listen to classic music, yeah. What? Yeah, and sometimes you can combine some of those things, right? So you tell your family, I'm gonna sit down and color for a while, right? Get the crayons out, light a candle, put on your favorite music, everybody unplug, okay? It's a novel idea and you might be surprised what happens. So as I've said before, I really like the grief schema that William Worden offers us. And he says it's a non-linear process. We're always working on all of these tasks and we're just kind of toggling back and forth. And he says the first one is just intellectual acceptance of what we've lost. That's hard because our brain has all these connections and it's hard to remind ourselves. But it's like a cyclical process. Again, every time we think, oh yeah, that person or that thing has changed or is gone. And now I feel my feelings all over again. Right? And so you have to devote a certain amount of time to just telling yourself, yep, this is lost and I'm gonna have to figure out a different way to live. For most people, processing emotions starts as soon as you start working on accepting the loss, right? So you're saying to yourself, I just can't believe it's true. Well, that brings up a feeling, right?
Yeah.
It's like shock or denial, maybe, like I don't want to believe it's true. Some people stay in that space for quite a while. And I think having people around you that can support you is really important at that time as you're trying to accept it. And then working on identifying what exactly am I feeling? Because sometimes it's just like this big mix of anger and sadness and fear and confusion. And so I think that we really can manage our emotions better if we really focus on just one at a time. The other ones aren't going away. They're still going to be there, right? And what that looks like for you might be different from somebody else. Like just writing about it would be one thing. And then give yourself a rest. This is something I've learned from working with children who grieve. So somebody important died, and especially young children don't have the cognitive ability to understand that this is a permanent loss. So they'll say things like, well, I'm ready for them to be done, be dead, or I'm ready for my parents' divorce to be over, like, and not be divorced, right? Whatever the thing is that they're trying to accept. And, I think that's a good example of the brain just like trying to take this in. What does it mean? And I think when we're feeling vulnerable, we kind of all go back to our early childhood experience. And so that's why denial makes sense. But what I notice about children is no matter how deep and profound their loss is, they take breaks, right? And I've had parents call me and say, well, yesterday she was really, really sad, but today she's out playing. So does that mean she's over this? I say, no, it just means her brain is tired of working on all those feelings. And she's decided to just do something else. When she's done playing, the feelings will still be there. And I noticed that adults seem to have more trouble with that.
Yeah.
And I think it's because when we get to a certain age, that self-awareness increases in the sense that we're aware that other people are watching us. And we put this message on ourselves that there is a correct way to grieve. And if I act like I'm okay, two things bad might happen. One, people might think that, you know, I'm doing it incorrectly, or I didn't really love so-and-so, or I'm not really worried about the country, or whatever it is. And then the other thing is, they might think I'm fine and they might stop checking in on me, right? So I've got to stay in this space all the time, right? And I don't think it's intentional like that, but I think it's unconscious. And so it's hard for us to say, you know what, let's take a break from grief today and go watch a funny movie, right? We're still grieving, but we kind of need a break. And I think that as you begin to experiment with those things, you're developing skills, right? So if you lost somebody and you're thinking about them at this time of year, and they're the person who always put the Christmas cards list together, you know, and mailed them out and took care of all that. Then the first year they're gone, you might feel like, oh, I don't really want to send cards. Well, that's okay, you know. But if it's something that's important to you, then you're either going to figure out how to do that yourself, or you're going to ask somebody else in the family to help you. And so that's why another example of what I mean by being intentional and not assuming that we've always got to do things the way we did them in the past. And then if you feel like your emotions are just kind of taking over, then that's a good sign that you might need to get some more support. How many non-functional days are you having in a row where you feel just like staying in bed or not doing anything? And I think engaging with scripture and theology is really important, because there's so much in our tradition to help us with this, right? All of our favorite Bible stories are about people who are having big feelings, right? And look at the Psalms, right? I mean, how many of them start out, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from my groaning? Why? Why can't I find you, right? So those are all the feelings that God gave us, and it's okay to bring them back to God. You don't always have to start with gratitude. Because in my experience, if we don't deal with our other feelings first, it's hard to find space for gratitude, and it feels kind of fake, you know. And then as you're developing those skills, you move into identifying and locating the loss in your story and being able to say, I lost someone or something that was really important to me, and it's okay if I talk about it. And I think writing, as I said before, is good because it gets it out of you. And how many people journal? Okay, so do you notice that when you go back and read what you've written, you learn things?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So your feelings change from a week or two ago or a month ago or something, right? And then you start to write something and you think, is that really true? So you're creating accountability with your deepest self and probably with God, right? And then as you tell your story, I think validate the work that you're doing. Today, I worked on just feeling my anger and I didn't try to fix it. I just said, it's okay. And I like the mantra, what am I feeling? What do I need? Right? And building that, like you can program your phone, right? Have an alarm to go off. And it just has feelings check, right? And check in with yourself. If you're not in the habit of doing that, that is a hard habit to develop. Because you know you feel good or bad, but those aren't really feelings, right? That's just kind of a climate. So, and then at the end of the day, what did you do to help yourself, right? And so the example I used, I just felt my anger, didn't try to fix it, didn't try to give myself a message that it wasn't okay to be angry. So sometimes people say, well, you know, I just feel like dropping out, or I feel like I've got to stay busy, right? Two extremes. And then they ask me, well, how do I know what I need at a specific time? And I like this strategy of listening to your inner voice. And you have to, if you're not in the habit of doing this, it's gonna take some time to identify them, but we all have a parent voice, which some people would equate with like the super ego. And it says, I should, I shouldn't, I ought to get up. I better get to work. I shouldn't really, have another piece of chocolate. Or, I must get this work done, right? Yeah, so that's our civilized, socialized way. And we all need one, right? We got it as a composite of parents and teachers and older siblings and, our best selves, our coaches, maybe our therapists, anybody who like really helped us to take responsibility and start adulting. And there's nothing wrong with it. Our child voice says, "Ugh, I don't want, I wish, I'm tired, scared, I'm lonely," right? And again, that was our earliest voice, as soon as we could form those words. And there's nothing wrong with that. But our inner child lives in us. And then we have an adult voice. It's kind of like Mr. Data on Star Trek or Mr. Spock, if that's your favorite. It's an analytic voice. It's an observing voice. It says, I notice, I wonder, it seems like, right? And that's the voice that's going to ask you, when did I eat last? Have I drunk enough water today? How much did I sleep, right? Now, we're in harmony and balance when those three voices are talking to each other. So you might wake up and say, oh, I do not want to do anything today, right? But then you look at your calendar and you say, oh, I've got these commitments. And so then your parent voice kicks in and says, you better get out, right? But that feels icky, right? Because your child voice is predominating, right? And then your adult voice, if you invite it in, might say something like, well, I noticed that I've got a really busy morning, but my afternoon could actually be rearranged. So if I need that break, that's when I'm going to take it. Right now, I've done some problem solving. I've created space for all three of those voices, right? And if you notice that your parent, any two voices are kind of in a power struggle, then it might be time to get more resources, the support of a friend or a therapist or somebody else who can just really help you sort that out. And a good example would be like, you're laying in bed and you're torturing yourself by saying, I've got to get up, I should get up. And your child voice says, I don't want to get up, right? And you're just stuck, right? And so kind of listening to your inner voice is going to tell you, are these voices working together or am I stuck someplace, right? That makes sense. Seeing some notes, okay, good. Accountability partners. You don't have to go to therapy to have an accountability partner. You can ask a friend or a family member that you trust. It works best if you have a clear contract. If you say to that person, I know that I have not been eating right, or getting enough sleep, or getting enough exercise, or one of those things that's out of balance. I would like you to check in with me every Friday and ask me, how did exercise go this week, right? And I would like you to tell me something that you can work on, that I have permission to check in with you. That creates balance, mutuality, and it lessens the possibility that you're going to feel nagged by that person, right? Because nobody likes to be nagged, right? Because then you're going to go to your avoidant mode. Uh-oh, so-and-so's calling. They're going to ask me how exercise went. I didn't go to the gym once. I don't want to talk to them, right? Yeah, so then that strategy is not going to be that helpful. Right, but if you can ask them, I would like to engage in this practice. Is there something that I could check in with you? And not all your friends are going to want to do that, but you can find one that worth their weight. Yeah. So other practices, I said journaling, drawing, emotion prayer practice. I love this one. So just deciding that every day in my prayer time, I'm going to focus on just one feeling. Going to create that sacred space, light a candle, whatever that it is that makes me feel like I'm in that prayerful place. And just honor that emotion. And one way you might do that is just start out by saying to yourself, it's okay for me to be angry. It's okay for me to be sad. Right? Anthropomorphize your emotions. How many people have seen the movie is it inside out? Yeah. Or inside out too, both of them, yeah. I love that. I have the little people in my office, and if you can start to talk to your feelings like they were creatures, I think again, you can learn a lot from that, right? And I think about that line in A Christmas Carol where Dickens, the ghost of Christmas, is it present or past? Says to Scrooge, one of the ghosts says to Scrooge, you were happy then. And Scrooge says, yes, because my mentor said, when happiness shows up, offer it a comfortable seat. And I love the image that like you have a table with chairs and you can decide which emotions to engage with.
That was the.
Thank you. Yeah. You can't prevent yourself from feeling, okay? And so the whole I should feel, I shouldn't feel, that's why that's so destructive because our feelings are just there. They're very elemental. We're born with them. As soon as we can name them, we start to accept them, I think.
I have my clients name certain emotions that they have regularly, and so they get to name it whatever they want to name it. And that's
so
kind
give
of
it a name.
like give it a
I
name.
love it. Yeah.
So like,
Or. Yeah, or like engage with that image that there's all these chairs around the table and I'm feeling pretty happy. And oh, look, anger just came in the door. You can say, oh, hi, anger. I'm sorry, there's no more chairs. I'm gonna deal with anger later, right? But the catch is you have to come back to it. You can't say anger can never come in the door, right? Yeah, but I mean, it's playful and it's, if you have grandchildren or children or nieces and nephews, they're gonna love that idea, right? What should we do with that feeling, right? And the idea that we can make choices regarding our feelings, right? We're still gonna have them, but how do we want to express them? And that's why I like the mantra, what am I feeling? What do I need? Right? And I might not need to engage with my sadness today. I recognize that here it is. But maybe today I'm really tired and I need some happiness, right? And so go back to the past Advent times when you have really connected with others and with your best self and with God, and ask yourself, like, how did I get there? Are there movies I like to watch? In our family, we watch It's a Wonderful Life and the Patrick Stewart version of Christmas Carol and A Miracle on 34th Street. And they're great for just getting out of your space and connecting with your tradition and feeling differently, right? Just kind of give yourself over to all that. You probably have your own favorites. What are some of your favorite films that you like to watch around the holidays?
National Lampoon's Christmas.
Okay.
Elf.
Oh, good one, yeah. Muppets Christmas.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's so good. Yeah. Yeah. And I think like you're gonna get invited to things, but you can choose, like you don't have to go to everything, right? And you don't have to help with everything, right? I have a little sign over my desk that says the need is not the call. And it's really important to validate what the need is not the call. Just because other people are doing important things doesn't mean that you have to do them. Sorry, yeah. And what I say is, I am really, really glad that you have taken that project on. And I can't do that right now, right? Now I need to work on my skills, right? For saying no, but I'm giving myself permission to say no. And think about the fact that if you say no because you need to say no right now, not because you feel guilty if you don't say yes, then that person is going to have the experience of asking somebody else who might really be called to do that, right? Because we cannot do the Holy Spirit's job, right? And so sometimes I say, I am going to pray that you find the person who needs to do that job, right? And so then I've said to that person, hey, what you're doing is important. My saying no is not an indication that, it's a dumb job or something like that, but, it's just not for me. I'm really working on discerning what I need to say yes to now. Okay. Yeah, so I gave you one of my favorite advent calendars, which is made by our friend Thomas, who is Dave's seminary roommate and is an Episcopal priest, and he sends this to us every year. I really recommend, you probably have another advent calendar that has chocolate or Bible verses or something, but do two, right? Do three if you want. And do it every day. But if you miss a day, don't give up, just get back on the horse the next day. Because I think that can be like the most meaningful part of your advent, is just making that space. And I also think that some of the gifts that we're going to receive, we might not know about anytime soon. And I think about the Christmas when we had 3 very small children and not very much money. And we were like almost done with our Christmas shopping and we realized, oh, we forgot to buy wrapping paper. And then we looked at our budget and we said, yeah, what if we just like decorate the presents ourselves? So one day while the kids were at kindergarten, we took brown paper bags and wrapped up the presents. And then we got out the paints and the markers and the crayons and we drew elaborate Bible stories and Christmas symbols and all kinds of stuff. They were so excited. And when we asked them, now that they're all grown up, like, what Christmases do you remember? Oh, the ones where you painted our presents, those were so cool. And here's like this fix born of necessity. And I was feeling kind of bad about it. And yet, like, that created a memory. So some of the things that we do, we might not know about for a while. The meaning, yeah.
Part of that story is that
I had a parishioner who is also a friend, and she continues to be a good friend that we're still close to, but she was horrified at that. She said, I would have bought you wrapping paper. She still doesn't get it to this day.
Okay, so I talked a lot. I want to hear what came up for you while I was talking, what ideas you want to share with each other.
I doubt that I need this, but I just want to reaffirm the extra benefit of those of us who are grandparents, modeling, accepting, talking to, being open about feelings with our grandchildren. And of course, I'm learning from my grandchildren, and I'm sure other grandparents are too. But it's such a, this is a way we can be good grandparents.
I would do things, I actually wrap my gifts in paper bags.
Yeah.
Even though I can afford
Exactly.
wrapping paper because it's better for the environment,
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
because the wrapping
Yeah.
paper isn't recyclable. I don't know if anyone knows that, like, you can't recycle it.
All right.
I do not wrapping paper.
And the kids love it. They have fun drawing on the gifts that they're getting away from people.
And if you got cats, that's a plus too, because they love their bag.
I could kind of extrapolate what you said. Talk to us about if we're gonna have a guest or a family member with us through the holidays whose grief is really powerful and is not being dealt with well, but we're the hosts.
I think that it's really important to talk about it up front and to name what's going on. We know that you are grieving and we don't know what you need, right? And so we're going to continue doing some of the things that are important to us. But anytime you feel like you need to opt out, don't worry about hurting our feelings, right? If you need some quiet time, that is okay. Or like tell them in advance, so our tradition is this. Can you think of a way that we could make it more affirming to you? Right? And that's where I think the whole idea of the blue Christmas came from, was like honoring the sad feelings that we have in the midst of joy to the world, right? Yeah.
Thank you for all this. I've taken notes. I'm thinking now about some people in my life who acknowledge that they struggle with anxiety. And one of the behaviors they often present is to complain about stuff that's happening this day or at this time or in life, and to do it in a joking way, as if to be lighthearted. And I'd really love suggestions on how I can, what I can say in those situations that moves them and us to a better place.
I think it's always great to start with your own experience. So you might tap into both your adult voice and your child voice. I noticed that when you say that, I feel. And I would really like to talk more about what that's like for you, right? I think intentionality is super important, because if you just jump on somebody and, you know, you don't tell them that you really want to explore that, then they go into defensive mode, right? But if you're willing, I would love to have a conversation about the fact that I hear you joking about it, but underneath it feels like you're really struggling, right? And I wonder if you want to hear some of the things I do to help myself when I'm feeling, you know, because maybe if you go first, then they're going to open up, right? And then if they say, you know, something that clearly feels like, no, I don't want to go there, then I think it's important to validate that. So it sounds like you're not ready to have that conversation, but when you are, please come and find me, because I would love to talk about that. So you've left the door open, you've given permission, but you're not forcing it. Any more suggestions from my fellow shrinks?
I was thinking that, when the girl just said that, I was thinking, yeah, in our best selves, we can talk like that.
Well, and even if you snap at somebody and say, why are you doing that, right? You can always go back and repair. So the other day when you made that remark, I noticed that I felt, and can we talk about that, right? Yeah.
I've been thinking for probably as long as I've been working on climate stuff, so a few years, which is a lot of grief for me about, and for a lot of people, I think, that how bad I am and how bad I think we are. And when I say we, I mean, I don't know what I mean, but for sure I mean the white church, but it might be bigger than that. At Lament. And like, at least we potentially have some structure or some liturgies around this, but I feel like mostly we're kind of hell-bent against Lament. And like, I'm not pointing a finger so much as I'm speaking for myself too. Like, we're opposed, I think I'm opposed to it, and we're opposed to it. And it feels like, as you were pointing out with the Psalms, such a weighty and rich part of our tradition that we just don't incorporate. And I talked to Mary about this, Mary Price, before she left, and we didn't get so far, but I was trying to figure out, is there a way that we could get better at Lament? Not in a should.
Well, I think we're probably taking a step in that direction just by being willing to talk about this morning. If you showed up and you're all engaged, and because I think it's a community space thing, okay? Because we're not all going to be feeling the same feelings at the same time. And I think recognizing that people have different feelings at different times, but making as many opportunities as we can for the lament, right? In the midst of what people might be feeling at other times. So there's always a way to connect with somebody else, right? And so that might mean, like, in the midst of a party where everybody's having fun, right? You say to somebody else that you notice is pretty quiet, I'm just not feeling this, you know? Do you want to go find a quiet corner and talk about some of the things I'm struggling with? You know, some of the things I'm just trying to bring to God, you know? I don't know. What other ideas do you have?
Well, we did have a service here of lament over sexualized violence. I mean, a ritual, which sought to incorporate our tradition and I'll call it counseling knowledge about how we deal with each other and move forward, and of course ended with hope and reconstruction. I think we could do more of that. I know that a lot of people are afraid of big feelings, and I'm one of them, you know, I mean, and so if I start to wear sackcloth and ashes and weep and wail, Doesn't exactly feel good to other people. And so I think we do need to make that container and
Mhm.
have some understanding.
Yeah,
When
and
was-
you said it,
When was that ritual? Long ago.
so maybe we need to do another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that lifting up all of our wounds, the wounds of others and the wounds of ourselves, is one of the really important things we do in worship. You know, so even if it's a joyful service, it should make some space for people who aren't feeling joyful. And at the end of that service, you said you ended with hope, but just acknowledging that not everybody's gonna walk out of here feeling hopeful, right? But if you connected with the voice that gave, you know, expression to your sadness and your pain, that's a place to start, okay? So I think when we talk about diversity, we have to recognize that our emotional processes are not always in line. And if you grew up in a church that say, used corporate confession that didn't really speak to you, right? Or used all male pronouns for God and humanity and stuff, you know, then probably a lot of your worship experience was very negative and you felt angry, right? But having the space to say that, that's really important, right?
When I'm thinking about this topic, I think that one of the most beautiful things about a community like this one, or like another one, is just being able to have that sense of belonging. And having a place where you can come no matter how you're feeling. So I think like what you kind of said at the beginning. Because I know, you know, when I've had really hard times, when you still have to show up to work and you have to show up to be a parent or just to like, do your adult responsibilities, but then it's nice to have a place where you can show up and just be, yourself. And so I do think that it's really nice to be able to acknowledge the full spectrum of how everyone's doing.
Thank you for that. I've worked with families who really struggle to name feelings. And sometimes they'll decide that today we're gonna wear a name tag with a smiley face or a frowny face or a worried face, right? Just to claim that feeling and know that we're all sitting here around the table. We're all in really different places, right? So, yeah.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, not only in families, but in all kinds of groups, and teams, I find it helpful to open by saying, let's have our full selves welcome here. And maybe have a little bit of a check-in circle to give people an opportunity to say, I'm great, or I'm scared about my sister who's having surgery, or whatever. And then it unleashes a kind of creative power and a problem-solving ability that wouldn't necessarily come forward if people weren't invited to be present fully.
Like that, thank you.
Some of you have heard of me saying this before, but when I was a girl, I remember thinking, oh, I'm a part of the ELC, well, it was that, not then ELCA, but I'm a part of this. And so I remember traveling all alone across the country in my little yellow Chevette. And we didn't have cell phones and was nervous, but would think, oh, I could always go to the Lutheran church and someone would help take care of me. And I think about the kids that are being confirmed today, and that's one of the things I wrote in the card was, you're always a part of our church and you're always a part of the wider church and you always have us. And then when I think about growing up, it was at Wood Lake. Well, we didn't have the kind of forums where we're talking like this. So I think our children might even feel it more, perhaps, I hope, than even someone like me who would have feelings and wasn't scared to show,
I was just gonna mention that with children, as they age, they have to reprocess grief. Because they start to understand it more as they age, and so, like, it's a continual process in some ways, as kids age. I had a client yesterday who, once a year, they go to a particular beach. And her father happened to, drown in water there. And she was trying to have a good time at the beach and kind of, avoid the negative, because it had been a good place before it was a bad place. And she's every year, like, her child would ask, this is where grandpa died, right? And she's like, and it was like, my kid was like slapping me in the face, like reminding me thing, and I was like, they're not, like, and she was like mad, like she thought that they were trying to upset her, I think. And I was like, no, like, they're trying to process it themselves, they're asking questions, because they're trying to process themselves. So, it's something to kind of be aware of.
Really good reminder, thanks. Okay, I'm noticing that our choir people have made a mass exodus. So I think we're out of time, but thank you, everybody, for your questions and contributions.
I just think kids have it easier with emotions, because kids have it easier with emotions because they're in the moment almost all the time. It's a beautiful thing.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, John.